Welcome back, sweet friends, to the Call to Love podcast. I'm so grateful to spend this time with you today, and I am very much looking forward to introducing you to my new friend, author Courtney Seibring. And we're going to be talking about every body wonderfully made. And what I mean by that is the unique and beautiful ways that God creates each of us, and especially our children, as we're thinking in the context of foster and adoptive parents. And Courtney talks about this in her new book, Everybody Wonderfully Made. And she reminds us all that we were made on purpose with purpose. And so we're going to dive into that today. Courtney, welcome. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Oh, thank you, Summer. It's great to be here with you.
You know, this is such an important topic as I really dove into who you are and what you do. And I've had a chance to get to know you a little bit and your story as an adoptive mom. But this is a really, really important thing for us to consider for our kiddos who were not born to us naturally, or we are parenting children who are not ours biologically. And so start off by sharing with us just a little bit about your story as an adoptive mom, and then we're going to dive into the topic today.
Okay, yeah, for sure. My husband and I have been married. We just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary. And thank you. The first 10 years or so of our marriage was very much colored by our desire to become parents. And that journey led us to fostering and then adoption. So I think it's really important to say that it is so true that in our weakness, that God is strong, and that, I came to the table, so to speak, with fostering and adoption from a place of weakness, from a place of need, from a place of desperation even. And that the Lord still used that the Lord still used the initial motivation, which was I just really wanted to become a parent. And he taught me so much about, really, through being a foster parent and then an adoptive parent. So, just to say that to your listeners, that there are so many hero foster parents out there, and we need them. We need the ones that take the medically fragile children and the sibling groups of 5, and we need these people so much, but not all of us are like that. And the Lord can use those with, a smaller plate, a limited plate. I always say, I have like a salad plate. I think it's more of a bowl, actually. It's very small, but it goes very deep.
I love that.
And the Lord can use that too. And so, we came to fostering from our struggles with becoming a parent, but now we have one beautiful little girl. And, in God's kindness, our story of adoption and especially its finalization was very much a parting of the Red Sea situation for us, meaning God made a way where there appeared to be none in terms of her staying with us. It did not look like it was going to go that way. And through that, I really learned how to pray the prayer, "Thy will be done." I don't know that I'd ever prayed it earnestly before, knowing that I have no control over the situation. I have no control over the outcome. And I trust, Lord, that you love this little girl more than I love her. And whatever the outcome is, I trust your will. And she ended up with us. And so, that is God's kindness, because when parenting gets hard, and it does get very hard, my husband and I are able to point back to just how evident it is that the Lord placed the 3 of us together specifically and made us a family. It's very kind of him to do that.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And I love that it started with that foster experience, and then the Lord, he just writes all of our stories with just such beauty and the intentionality that you're talking about. I absolutely, we have so many similarities, Courtney, and I love that. My husband and I just celebrated 20 years as well. And our daughters are just a few months apart. I know you shared yours just turned 10. Mine's going to turn 10 here in a few months. And so we've walked parallel journeys for a long time, and we're just now getting to meet, which I think is just really, really cool.
It is cool.
And I'm so amazed at your story already, just from what I've had a chance to learn from you, in that you and I both received our daughters. They joined our families as infants, and we had an idea about what their story might look like But as it's unfolded, it's been entirely different, which has caused you and I both to have to seek an equipping for our daughters as parents in a very unique way. And so let's talk about that a little bit, because we've talked a lot on the show about expectations and what we think things are going to look like. And then when they don't, we can wrestle with feeling disappointed or maybe even disconnect from our kids a little bit. So talk about what that looks like to see our children as individuals, beautifully created by God, challenges and all.
Absolutely. It's through the writing of this book, I've really dug into the idea of what it means to be an image bearer. And I've really asked the Lord to help me look at everyone, that crosses my path as an image bearer first and foremost. And that's no different than with my own child, that she's an image bearer. My brother was a pastor for a long time, and he's studying to be a mental health counselor right now. One of the things that he told me early on was, love your neighbor, Courtney, and she's your neighbor. She's your little neighbor.
That's great.
Yeah, and that has really stuck with me. So yeah, I hope that answers your question to an extent. That
yes,
I think that's first and foremost in my mind. And also too, something else that comes to my mind now, just as we're talking about this, is that it's been challenging, but one of the things that has come out of it for me is I'm learning about myself and like myself as a child. I'm going back and I'm going, oh, wow, what do I need to say to little Courtney in this, so that I'm in a place to speak to my daughter? So, even in the heart, it reveals so much about us, not just as parents, but as human beings and as children of God. As you were praying before we started, that we're in a relationship with God where he's parenting us as we parent our own children. It's so beautiful, all of the back and forth, these different relationships and how they're interconnected.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. I love what your brothers share. I mean, that is just really, really profound, especially in the times where we are worn down, we're tired, we're like, why are we still going through the same struggles? And, why is there a struggle with this? We just did a big episode on blocked care, and that's a big part of that. And what a profound thing to remember, that your child is your little neighbor in your home, and to love thy neighbor as thyself. I mean, that is fantastic. And I think about that in terms of image bearer, because you're spot on. And that is how we are to see every single person that we encounter, especially those that are closest to us. But it is so clear and evident in our society that the way that God has created us is under attack. And any attempt, to counter any, the misleading narratives that we are just inundated with and our kids are inundated with, we're quickly accused of being intolerant. And there's this tension there. And so we as Christian parents, especially with our kiddos who have been fostered or adopted, who might be struggling with their story a little bit, I mean, I just feel like there's a greater sensitivity to lend their ear to, as they're seeking, what I mean by that, they're just really seeking a better understanding of their story and who they are and how God made them and why they are where they are.
Right.
And so with all of that, Courtney, talk about why it's so important to guide our children in establishing who God made them to be according to Scripture, and drowning out what the world says.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that with any child, pointing them to the truth, just getting them grounded in that, because we do live in a culture right now where you define what truth is. It's often based on how you feel. It's often based on how you feel in the moment, that there's no solidity. Kids are often very anxious. And so having something to go back to that is solid, that is the same, that is never changing, truth is just this exhale. It's this exhale for them and even us, right? As we're going through and parenting them, it can be very confusing for us. And I think it's really important for us to surround ourselves with other people who are speaking the truth into our lives. Obviously going back to the Word of God itself. and staying grounded in that. You know, we talk a lot in our family about our feelings because we have a lot of them and they are very big. And so we talk about
I can relate.
Yeah, right. So we talk about how our feelings are very good. They are from the Lord. What a gift it is to go through life, being able to feel, being able to get in touch with that side of yourself. That being said, our feelings are not the guides. They are not the ones dictating to us how to behave, how to live, how to make decisions, that there is something and someone greater outside of ourselves, outside of our feelings, which are so fleeting. And I mean, it goes both ways, right? So, you know, I would say to, you know, my daughter who's feeling that she's dumb. It's like, okay, well, is that true? Why are you feeling that way? You're feeling dumb. Does that mean you're dumb? Or you're feeling fill in the blank. Does it mean you're that way? So I don't know. Well, let's go back to what the word of God says about you. No, you're precious. You're chosen. You're important. Your life has value and worth. You're feeling that way right now. And I understand. I can validate those feelings. I feel that way too sometimes. But how great is it that that's not where we get to camp, right? To bring our mind back to what the truth is. Right. The world we live in is such a skewed reality. And so it's hard sometimes to do that, not fall into like, oh, what's going on around me, what I can see, what I can hear, what I can feel. That's reality. It's like, actually, reality is so much deeper than that. Let's stay connected to that.
Yeah, that's so true. I love that. And I think it's important you talk about big feelings, and we have a lot of those in our house as well.
For sure.
And I think, you know, to your point, a lot of our kiddos struggle with that because they're just trying to get their bearings in a world that, you know, there's something is off because there's been that disconnect from biological family for various reasons. And so I think our kids do struggle with, definitely my child does as well, with a lot of those anxiety behaviors and the seeking behaviors and all of that. And in all of that, you know, there's certain behaviors that do require more direction, more correction, more discipline.
For sure.
And if we're not careful, and myself included, I'll raise my hand high on this, you know, it can come across as though something is wrong with them because what I'm doing is causing mom or dad or teacher to be frustrated with me. And so when we're talking about being an image bearer, when we're talking about teaching our kids truth and value in who they are and purpose in who they are, how do we balance that as parents to correct behaviors, to disciple, to discipline, to do all the things without communicating that there is something inherently wrong with our child?
Wow. I wish I knew. What a great question. Well, let me think about it. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just reminding our kids that you are not what you do. You know, I mean, you can go back to, again, the word of God. You know, the Apostle Paul talks about, I do the things that I hate and I hate the things that I do. I mean, my daughter is really loves the story of Paul, like how he was changed on the road to Damascus and how, you know, he did all these wonderful, amazing things for the church. And so what I came to her and was like, hey, listen to what Paul has to say. He struggles too. And he's reminding you, you are not what you do. Right. So I think for me, it's like reminding her that the reason that the correction is coming, I tell my daughter all the time, if I didn't care for you, I would let you be annoying. I'd let you be belligerent. I'd let you, you know, just be a big jerk. But you know, in the same way that God disciplines us and our hearts, it's out of love. It's out of kindness. I mean, you know, they seems pleasant at the time. She can really relate to that memory verse, but I think that we show in other ways, you know, it's not, we do show through the correction that we have an intense love for our children, but that love probably won't be realized until they're like gone from our houses, right? Where they can reflect on that love. And so I think that the kind of love that we can show them is attunement, is meeting them where they're at, is you know, spending time, all of those things. Like that's where they're going to feel the love. ones that need to keep it in our minds that the correction is necessary and that that is a form of love, and to do it in a way of love, so I'm constantly reminding myself, like, sometimes my corrections get really harsh or frustrated because it's the 150th time I've said the same correction. And so I have to remind myself, okay, well, what is my motivation? If my motivation is to create positive and lasting change, if my motivation is to show her love, then I can make this correction, and I can do it in a way that has a very teacherly to it, not an annoyance, not a frustration. So that, again, you're like raising your hand high. That is, I'm preaching to myself here, is that I need to remember that the way in which I present something to her, the way in which I present even a correction to her, it matters. It absolutely matters. And she can feel love or, not from the way in which I'm approaching her.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's fantastic. And I would love for you to share, because before we hit record today, you were talking about how the Lord has just blessed you with an incredible support and mental health professional for your daughter and your family. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about this idea of repair. And I think that is so important, because we are not always going to get it right. We are going to get frustrated. We have our own shortcomings as parents, and our fuses can be short, and our bodies get tired, and we forget the mission. We forget to stay focused on what you just shared. And I think you shared it beautifully, and absolutely we need to ask the Lord to equip us day in and day out with that type of mindset, because that is how he instructs and disciplines us as well. But for the moments where we do fall short, talk about this idea of repair, because I think it was so fantastic.
For sure. And it's huge for me because I fall short often, and so it would be easy for me to just get down on myself and wallow in that, and perpetuate the anxious, negative, sort of feeling in the home. So this idea of repair, that there's going to be rupture always. And we'd love to avoid that when possible. But when there is rupture, really making sure that there is a good repair that happens. And I think that, from a biblical perspective, that'd be like a reconciliation, that would be going to our child and saying, you needed a correction in this moment. I didn't do it the way I wanted to. And we've done do-overs, and we've done like rehearsals and all these things, and so why not mom? Why can mom not go and say, hey, you know what? If I were to do it again, it would sound like this, and often when I do that to my daughter, she's like, yeah, that sounds a lot better than, what you did before. I probably would have responded differently. And I can say, hey, that's the goal. That's the ideal. But I've fallen short too. And so I think demonstrating repair, demonstrating how to apologize, how to go to a person and humble yourself. I think early on, I used to think like, oh, well, this is going to diminish my authority in her life. This is going to diminish, my role of being the parent and being in charge. And I think quite the opposite is true. You're seen as someone who is vulnerable, as someone who is relatable. You are demonstrating the proper way to go back and to make amends that your child doesn't know how to do yet, that's something that they need to be taught. And there are lots of opportunities, at least in our house, for me to go and repair, So that's what that was about.
That's so fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that, because you're right. I mean, modeling healthy relationships and that healthy family dynamic is our goal as a parent, regardless of how our children come to us. But certainly, as we know that we are parenting children who are seeking a little bit extra and understanding their story and why and how God made them to be who they are. And with that, statistically, it is very, very common for many of our kiddos to not physically match us or look like us, whether that is, features, skin tone, ethnicity, all that sort of a thing. Right. And so how can we encourage our kiddos in their value, and that they are exactly who they're meant to be and where they are meant to be, regardless of the fact that they may or may not match the rest of the family?
Right. It's a great question. It's really important to set a foundation of truth for our children, something that they can use to compare and contrast any message that they're receiving. And leading them to scripture ensures that they will, for a lifetime, not just the time that they're under our roofs, will have a trustworthy place to go for answers. Yeah, there's that. As far as our adoptive children go who don't necessarily match their families, I think that we can encourage them to first acknowledge how real and normal those feelings are. And then remind them that the truth is bigger than our feelings, that the truth is that they are valuable, that God did place them with us for a reason. And also, I think that to let them know we don't have to understand every mystery. Say that is because I think it's a very delicate balance to say to our kids, oh, it was God's plan for you to be with us, and walk that tension of, okay, but why wasn't it God's plan for me to be with my biological parents? So I just want to add that caveat, right? So that you know your child best of how you can present that to them. But I think that there has to be a real sensitivity that mystery to a side of it, right? Like we live in a fallen world, and we know that there was an intention in creation, that there was a fall, and that there is redemption, but there is also a lot of mystery surrounding it. And my husband so often says to our daughter, hey, I'm confused too about some of these things, but what do we know? Big God.
Yeah.
We know that he's a big God. In control. We know that he's in control of our lives. He loves us. He loves us so much. Those are the things that we do know. So in light of the things that we don't know, in light of the mysteries that we are living in and will continue to live in this side of eternity, we can latch on to the things that we do know. I would say that we can pray with our kids too, that God would reveal to them very specific ways that they hold worth, and let the Lord talking there. And, where we can say, hey, you know what? This is what I do know. I don't know all the answers, but I know who does. So I will pray with you that God would reveal to you specifically in a way that only God could reveal to you why you're important to him, why you're special to him, and we can say uplifting words to them about their appearance, what we find particularly beautiful or special about, the way God made their bodies. All those things can go a really long way as well.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I love that. And I want to kind of expand upon that a little bit, because I do believe that it represents our listeners to say, like, we have our kiddos who have or will at some point come to us with something that they don't like about themselves. Mm-hmm. And especially when that compares to if it's different from what their adoptive or foster family is, or, gifts, talents, athletic ability, features, whatever that might look like. And they might say, well, I don't like that I look like this, or I can't do this. How can we as Christian parents respond in a way that encourages them, that their hearts can receive that?
Well, we can be honest about times in our own lives where we felt that way. Children love to hear stories about their parents, and it's encouraging to any person to understand that they aren't the first person to ever feel that way. I think that's probably one of the, and I don't remember a ton from when I was a child, but I do remember that feeling of like, man, I'm the only one that feels this way. And I mean, I feel that way as an adult too sometimes, and it's so not true. It's so not true. And so when we can reveal to our children, maybe even a story of like when we felt like a time where we didn't like something about either our appearance or our abilities, to let them know you aren't the first person to have ever feel that way. In that process, we're creating an attunement. We're creating this common ground of like, hey, you know what? I know what that feels like. I don't know this specific situation, but I do know something like it. And then I think that there's a lot of matching. Like, we may not match on the outside, but more often than not, there's a lot of matching that is happening on the inside, just by virtue of the fact that they're image bearers and we're image bearers. They're humans going through the human experience, and we are too. And so I think to speak to our kids about that they're image bearers and find those connection points when it comes to the human experience.
Yeah.
We could talk to them about how God brought us wholeness in that specific, place where we were feeling less than, or about how God is still working on us to bring wholeness. And we can absolutely lead from a place of brokenness. I think that an admission that we are still in process of becoming, and that we are still completely reliant on God to guide and direct our hearts in the process is a really valuable thing for our children to hear. I also think, though, that it depends, right, on what our children want to change. It's been very encouraging to me as a parent to hear my own child express desires for change in relation to like an undesirable posture or behavior, So those are good.
Yeah.
Those are good desires to be encouraged.
That's right.
So I know that's a little bit of a separate topic, but just to throw that in there, there are some things that they want to change that in their heart that do need to be changed, right? It's the same for us.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a great point, because I think it has definitely been my experience and the experience of many parents that I've talked to that our kiddos do struggle with control. And so to your point, that is something they can control. Let's take that energy and put it towards something that does improve, their experience with others, their own growth journey, their journey with the Lord, and that kind of a thing. And so I think that's a good, I don't want to say redirect, but that is something to point their attention to and to encourage them in, especially if they're stuck in those, negative thought patterns when it comes to things like maybe physically about themselves that they would want to change. I want to take it just another step further, because I think this is an important point. For some of us, and you and I share this in common, and for a lot of our listeners, we had our children from very early on, early developmental stages, newborn, toddler, that sort of a thing. But what about the parents who are receiving their kiddos who had a previous experience and worldview exposed to them, that they've learned something that's completely counter to this idea of being an image bearer, of understanding their value and their worth and what truth is? How would you encourage these parents who are almost kind of feeling like they're already behind because their kids have already been taught something else?
Wow. Yeah, that's a uniquely challenging situation. And I'll say up front that this isn't something that I have, personal experience with. But that said, I honestly don't know that my advice would be any different for a parent who's been with their child their entire lives. I would say continue to point them with the truth, continue to surround them with influences that point them to the truth. We're gatekeepers for our children, and we're curators for their imaginations. And I think that we need to be very critical of what they consume. And especially if they're coming from a place where they already have this baseline of false belief about themselves, their worldview, spending some time being very intentional about what they're consuming, right? It's not just about what we are saying to them. It's about what they're reading, what they're listening to, who they're hanging out with. And, your child, but they're seeing, listening to it, generally speaking, it feeds their imaginations. And we know that imagination shapes virtue, which is one of the reasons why, I chose to write these children's books that I did, is because I understand that when we can capture the imagination of our children at a very young age, for goodness, beauty, and truth, that shapes them. But I don't think that it's necessarily different for children who are older. It may seem extreme in the day and age that we live in, but we as a family have chosen not to give our daughter a cell phone or have access to social media. And we're not going to revisit that probably until she's 17 or 18 years old. Yeah. And as we prepare her to be on her own, right? Because we do want her to have some time in our house where she is, exposed to those things, and we have some preparation, but we see no benefit in it for her in particular with what we know about her and her personality. And so I'd say finding, and it is difficult, but finding other people who hold that same, I don't want to say value, but like have made that same decision. There's an organization called Screen Strong that has some valuable tools and resources on that specific topic that we've found helpful. But I mean, suffice it to say, there's zero evidence that social media is a reliable source of information for children of any age who are seeking to understand themselves or their bodies or their value or their worth. But there's a wealth of evidence that speaks to how damaging it is in terms of their view of self. So again, like I know that can be a little bit of a divisive topic, but I'm going to throw that out there as something that I would encourage parents of older children to really consider. And I would say also, any foster or adoptive family, young or old, children that are younger or older, get a care team around you. Know how important and necessary that was going to be, right? You talked about our idea, here we are now, we're this little family and we're going to love's going to get us through. And it is so important. Counselors, occupational therapists, pediatricians, other parents who get it, which is another reason why like this podcast is so great, right? Everybody who's listening is someone who gets it. And we need that community. We cannot do this in isolation.
So true. Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And I love that you said occupational therapy because I'm married to one.
Oh, and so, yes, good.
A little plug, yes. But I think that's so, so true. And I love that answer. And I love everything that you shared. And I really appreciate the challenge. We've talked about, we have a friendship with Protect Young Eyes, which is another great organization that can offer those resources. And so we need to put those in today's show notes just so that you guys can go back and reference those as a point of encouragement. We don't ever want to give recommendations without also offering tools for you to research. So I appreciate you sharing that, Courtney. I think that would be great if you guys want to dive into that more. It is so important. I want to wrap up our conversation today by kind of bringing it back to one of the first things that you said, that was talking about being an image bearer of Christ. And so, we were created on purpose with a purpose. And as we know as believers, that is to know Christ and to share him with others and to be in relationship with him and to, carry out his virtues and live life in such a way that points others to Christ. And so our parenting of our kids and our involvement with others is no exception to that. And the problem with that is that we live in a broken world that tries to redirect and pervert that or reverse that and make it all about ourselves.
Yes.
And so as we're talking about celebrating how God made us, how can we as Christian parents hold that in a balance of it's not all about us. We celebrate who God made and how he made you, but it's not all about you. So how do we balance that as Christian parents, Courtney?
So great. That is to get our children involved in opportunities to serve others. Christ did not come to be served, but to serve. And about it now, I'm thinking about how we as a family can kind of up our game in this department. Particular about what we can do and how late we can stay out. And I think you understand what I'm saying, like anything that we get involved in outside of the home, we have to be very particular about that. So I want to offer that to people who are like, oh man, you don't know what it's like. You're telling me to go out and serve, but you don't know what it's like with my kids. So in ways that you can, I think this places the value of leaning out, so to speak, in the forefront of their minds, and I think another benefit of that is getting the attention off themselves, right? With so many appointments or parent teacher conferences or whatever, the focus is so much on them and, what needs to change and how they can improve and all of those things. And so this places the focus in outside of themselves. It's more of a leaning out. So if they see service to others as a family way, I think that that's going to help position them to think of others, to recognize that they're part of a community, that there are others, that the world doesn't actually revolve around them. And, as I'm saying this now, I think that it's maybe even more important when so much of the focus is on them, right? Because we are trying to get them help. We are trying to get them resources. And so in that vein, so much of the focus is on them. To this notion of like them being able to define themselves, the world revolves around me. I can define who I am. We can share with them honestly ways in which we've attempted to be like the captain of our own ship, so to speak, and how that shook out for us, and how God in his kindness has brought us back to, like recalibrated us to his truth. Yeah, I think that's the main thing that I'm thinking of is like leaning out, serving others, other people who need help, Oftentimes, we know our own children's strengths. And one of our daughter's strengths is that she's very outgoing and she's very social. And so just one personal example is like dropping her off at, say, Sunday school when she was younger and saying, hey, you know what? Find the kid that's lost and lonely. Like you can do that. You're really good at being a good friend. So can you just keep your eyes open? Can you just look for the kid who seems like maybe on the fringes? So that's taking the focus off her. It's encouraging her that, wow, you're really good at this and you can use it for good.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love that example. What a great reminder. And I think that is so important because you're such a great point. Everything, there's so much that is about them in the day in and day out as we're trying to help our kids thrive and succeed. And then our families thrive and succeed as a result of that. But we have to keep that balance. That really is important. So what a great reminder. And I really love what you said about identifying and verbalizing those strengths that the Lord has given. So it's not just about the negatives and the growth areas that we're focusing on all the time, but it is about the whole person being an image bearer, someone that we have absolutely been gifted the ability to love and to parent. Such a great reminder. Courtney, I have loved everything that you have shared today. It's been so good for my soul. And I want to make sure that our listeners can connect with you more. I definitely want to encourage you guys to get a copy of Everybody Wonderfully Made. So how can they do that?
Yeah, I'd say go to the landing page at Paraclete Press. So the landing page is just everybodywonderfullymade.com. You can get a little synopsis of the book, learn a little bit more about me, connect with me. My email address is on there if you want to connect with me. But it's available now wherever books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and of course from Paraclete Press. Your listeners can even go to their local library and request a copy of the book. I think that's a great way to get books like this with positive, biblically based messaging on the shelves of their own local library. So I'd really appreciate that.
That's a great idea. I love that. Okay, that's our challenge. Call to Live challenge for the week. Everybody go to your library and request a copy. That's fantastic. I hadn't thought of that before.
Absolutely.
But what a great idea, because you're so right. We need these biblically based resources on the shelves and accessible to our kids and to our families. And so, Courtney, I have just had the best time chatting with you, and I'm so grateful for the work that you are doing. And listeners, I know that you have been blessed by her as well. So I will have all those links in today's show notes. And today is launch day. So we're super excited to be able to celebrate launch day with you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
We'll come back again. Thank you for being my guest.
Absolutely. Thank you.